knowing that we have until October to make payments. We're not being forced to pay. No interest is accruing, so we have some time before we find out if these loans are going to be forgiven. That provides us an opportunity to do some planning. So while this is not recommendations, you should consult your financial advisor. All of those things you should be doing. We can still give you some ideas and some conversations to have. Okay, so there's been some development with the student loan forbearance program being extended with the new administration. That affects a lot of people, but especially millennials. And Thomas, you are our millennial expert here at RLS Wealth. So I wanted to have you come break down what's going on. What does it believe President Biden's going to do? What does that mean for those of us that might have student loans? So give us a quick rundown of what's going on.
Yeah, so I think the first part that's important to note is none of these changes are for sure made, but it still gives us some options and things to think about while we wait to figure out what ends up happening. So basically, there's been an extension on the student loan forbearance, which for those of you that don't know it basically means that you don't have to pay towards your student loans until October of this year. And if you don't, there's no interest accruing on those loans. What's important to note is this is only federal student loans. So if you went out and refinanced your loans after you graduated, those are not going to be forgiven, as well as any graduate student loans that you had. So I think that's like the first important starting point.
So real quick, so private loans, are those in the forbearance as well? Just the federal loans?
Just the federal student loans.
Okay, and now we're talking about the potential of President Biden approving $10,000 of federal loans being forgiven. And that's the thing we don't know about yet.
Yep.
So it's kind of the stay tuned. We'll keep you up to date. We'll be talking about all of that as we learn more. Just know that's out there. But knowing that we have until October to make payments, we're not being forced to pay. No interest is accruing. So we have some time before we find out if these loans are going to be forgiven. That provides us an opportunity to do some planning. So while this is not recommendations, you should consult your financial advisor. All of those things you should be doing. We can still give you some ideas and some conversations to have. Yeah. So what are some planning opportunities that are in front of us between now and October? I'll throw out the first one. Do I even make a payment on my student loans?
So I think you kind of can split yourself into two groups. If you have less than $10,000 in student loans, it might make sense not to pay towards them, because why pay off loans that are just going to be forgiven? You're honestly just dumping money somewhere that you don't even need to. So I think that's one consideration. If you're way above $10,000, I think it's kind of getting an understanding of yourself, because if you're somebody that could just go save the money you would be putting down as a monthly contributions to your student loans, then that's a good option. Save it. It gives you options. That way, if something crazy happens, it's almost like another emergency fund where you wouldn't have to swipe your credit card. And then if student loans start back up in November, you could put all of that savings down to help wipe out a large amount of it. But again, that's understanding yourself. If you're somebody that sees money in your savings account and you're going to spend it, then that's probably not the best option for you.
And maybe you want to direct that savings into an account that's a little bit further removed. Maybe you don't want to put it in a Roth IRA because you might end up wanting to have it later on, but maybe you put it in a brokerage account or just set up a separate account that's not where all of your banking is, so it's out of sight, out of mind, and then you can make a decision later on. I'm going to play the opposite side of that. So there's no interest accruing. I have an opportunity over the next, 8 months now, to attack that principle a little bit harder. Shouldn't I do that?
I think that there's a good opportunity to do it. I think if you're somebody that maybe if you don't have an emergency fund built up and maybe you have other high interest debt, it's probably going to make sense to focus on those two things first. But if you have those things covered and you don't really need those additional dollars, sure, it could be a good option for you to do it. There just isn't much of an advantage of doing it monthly versus paying that whole balance of all that you could have saved over that 10 months down in October. There really wouldn't be much of a difference whichever way you do it. The only difference is if you're the person that isn't going to save it and you're going to spend it, then it makes a big difference.
Right. And just to give you some context, when would it maybe make sense to hold on to your money for 8 months? If we had interest rates that were anything inside of a savings account, you could say, okay, I'm going to earn 1% or 2% on my money for the next 10 months. Granted, it's not going to be a lot or game changing, but I get a little bit more out of it. And now we're not getting anything in our savings. And I would also throw caution out there that if you think you're going to take those dollars and save them and then have more in October to pay off, that would be something that would be a very high risk. The shorter amount of time that you're in the market, the more risk comes with it. So that would probably not be the most prudent thing to do if you plan on using those funds in the future. I think that part of this answer is personal. There's the personal finance is more personal than finance. I say that all the time. But if you have a very strong desire to rid yourself of debt, and you've got your emergency fund, you're saving everywhere else, you don't really have a need to take these college loan payments and do something else with it, then maybe you continue to plow through and you get through it a little bit quicker because you paid down principal with no interest. I think it kind of goes into your personal preferences. You combine that with your plan, and therein lies where the best answer might be. Me personally, I like having control. I want to have access to my capital. So even if I had everything lined up perfectly, I would still want to hold on to those dollars. And I would be okay knowing that it's going to take me a few months longer because I didn't take advantage of this time period to pay my student loans off in the future to maintain those dollars and have control over them. It's a personal preference. But I do think, if anything, it gives you the opportunity to revisit your plan, revisit your preferences, and figure it out. And have a game plan. Say, okay, it's the end of January, February through October. Here's my game plan when it comes to my student loans. I'm going to do this, and here's the reason why, and here's what's going to happen when it ends, if it ends. And then if we find out there's forgiveness, then you kind of walk through that. But I would agree that anybody with less than $10,000 with a federal loan, it seems kind of silly unless you have this pride or you don't want to have that gift given to you of having your student loans forgiven. Some people don't want a handout. Then maybe continue on with your plan. So as you can see, there's a lot of non-numerical factors that go into it. There's not a right answer across the board. There's a right answer for you and for your friends, but it's really what's best with your personal finances. So in closing, I don't even make this a long one. Anything else that we need to be thinking of when it comes to this forbearance period of time and then the possible forgiveness?
Yeah, the other question that I've been asked is if I'm going towards a loan forgiveness program where I have to work for 5 years or 10 years, whatever program you're going to, if I don't pay during these months, does that still count? And it does. So if you pause for the next 10 months and don't pay down, you're still, those 10 months count towards whichever goal you have of the 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, depending on the program.
Yeah, so there are programs out there that if you meet requirements, your student loans will be forgiven. So a common one that I've seen is teachers. If you go teach at a public school, after 10 years of teaching, any outstanding loans that you have would be forgiven. Some of those cases, those loans are taxed as income. Sometimes they're not. In the case of the current forbearance that's been issued by the government, the best understanding is those are, well, take that back. If they are forgiven, the language that reads today is those would not be considered income. That could change. They're going to have to get both sides of the government to agree to it. So it may be a condition where they're going to forgive the loans and it might be taxed as income. That'll be something that when it's finalized, come back to us, come back to Thomas, and we will make sure you understand what would be the implications of having those loans forgiven. But the way it's being laid out today is those would not be taxed as income. So those are the little details that finding reputable sources to help you out is very valuable.
Yeah. So if you have any specific questions, you can always reach out and ask us, but look into your specific loans and kind of get an understanding of your own picture.
And the final thing, if you were thinking of refinancing your federal loan into a private loan, definitely hold off just in case. You could always refinance it in October or whenever this might end or when we find out whether or not there's going to be any forgiveness. But if you have not refinanced, you might just want to hold off. The beauty is you're in a period where you don't have to make payments, no interest is accruing, so use this opportunity to breathe for a second.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll keep you up to date. Thomas will keep you up to date. I'll shut up more next time. But thanks for tuning in. Hopefully this was helpful. Leave any comments down below of any other questions, follow-up things you'd like to hear. This question actually came from one of our clients. So shout out to AC. You'll know who you are for giving us this idea for this great video. And we'll keep you up to date as we learn more, along with other things that may come up along the way. So we'll see you in the next one.
Hope everybody noticed the long game gear we finally have.